It takes students out of their comfort zone and provides a unique space to debate and participate with respect. Educating future voters to the nuances of the political process. This is where they learn how to listen and how to compromise. You can't teach it, you have to experience. And I can't help myself, but it's more than tempting to wonder how many of our elected officials in Washington could actually pass the test. Please welcome from the EMK Institute, Chief Information Officer Christopher Reichert, and Gigantic Mechanics partner and game designer Greg Treffy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's great to be here. And not only is a gigantic mechanic, but he's super tall.
Yeah.
I was tall, but it's great to be here. You know, having been to all the sessions this morning, and I was feeling a little bit insecure that I don't have volcanoes or roller coasters or anything like that. But I guess the things that we do happen in the chamber. So the Edward M. Kennedy Institute, Christopher and Greg, we a little bit about Senator Kennedy, because I think we have a bit of an international audience here in case you don't know who Senator Kennedy was. He was the youngest brother of President John F. Kennedy, and he served as the senator from Massachusetts for 47 years. So in that 47 years, he had a lot of experience dealing with all sorts of different government that were in the Democrats, Republicans, and in the Senate and the House, having to deal with people who disagreed with him, partly because who he was, and a lot of because what he represented. So he had a huge reputation as someone who could work across the aisle, get compromise, and be very effective for his causes, but also at the same time having civility in the way that he engaged with his opposition. And it's not very well known, but he was a good friend of Nancy Reagan's, for example. And even though he and President Reagan did not get along politically, personally, that was a huge factor in his success. So towards the end of his career, actually before he became ill, he died in 2009, his son-in-law, I think it was his son-in-law, Ed Schlossberg, yeah, asked him, you know, what do you want your legacy to be? And so they thought about this, and they discussed it over many years. And he concluded that it wasn't about Edward M. Kennedy, it was more about the United States Senate. And it was about how the role of the United States Senate in our government and in the lives of our citizens, and also its role in foreign policy. It is one of the few that can reach out and have credibility internationally as well. So that was his inspiration, and he decided that instead of building something for himself, even though it has his name on it, it really was driven by his desire to have a permanent place to discuss the firsthand, the running of the Senate, history of Senate, and civic engagement. And he wanted to, over his career, he did inspire people. I don't know if you can see in this picture, but there's Senator Kennedy in the early 70s, and on the top left is Secretary of State John Kerry. Before they were opposing the war, and he came out and talked to them about their issues. So this is over many, many years, and it wasn't all hard work, because I found this picture just over at Disneyland Hotel right now. That's actually, I guess, the 9th floor and the blue dot in the middle there, in the elevator. So he wanted a place, actually, where people could come and engage in this experience. And so what we did was, we have this building in Boston, and here's a diagram of the building. We have a variety of spaces in there. So you come in on the bottom right there, and there are columns with 50 states, bollards on there, the lobby. And then we have an outer surround space with exhibits. So people were talking earlier about all their 4Ks and bits and bytes and whatnot. We have 30 Christie projectors and 30 Mac Pros and 28 projectors, screens in our chamber. So a few bits and pieces of technology there. But at the center of it is the reproduction of the Senate chamber. So this is where he spent 47 years, in this space. And you can see that it's very few women. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, broken leg down there. But really, it's an august space. And so this was, part and parcel. So a lot of what we saw this morning and throughout the day was entertainment, but creating a place where people go to bring them to the experience to make it come alive much more effectively. So what we did was we built a replica of the Senate chamber. That's our Senate chamber. It is a one-for-one replica of it. There are a few things that are missing because we can't by law, but we have senators who come and visit us, and they point to their seat. That's where I sit. It feels at home. And when they come and actually speak, sometimes we'll put them in the majority minority leader seats so they can go up front and speak. And they're saying, no, this is wrong. I should be 5 rows back and over to the left. So, but what we're talking about here today is what this replica of the Senate chamber allowed us to build as part of the experience, which we call the Senate Immersion module. And it sits literally in the heart of the building, as you saw. And it is the crown jewel, as far as I'm concerned, of the Institute. Students come in, and they are sworn in. They put their hand up, and they take the oath, just like a senator takes the oath. And they get some technology involved as well. They customize a tablet that each one of them has. Take a picture, but they're all signed an identity. So you'll have a student from Massachusetts who has to take on the role of a senator from Texas. So someone has probably wildly different values and motivations that they do. So that's part of the experience. The tablet acts as sort of a Senate staffer. It gives them information about the bill. You can see here we've got provisions and amendments. So they're starting to build a bill. So in the morning, they're given what we call morning business, where they're introduced to the topic of the day. And then they're divided up into committees and subcommittees. So in this case, you can see that we have Secretary of State, Department of Homeland Security. And then they go off to the caucus rooms, committee and caucus rooms, which we have classrooms around the edges. And we have these facilitators, you can see with the beard there, who are crucial to the experience. We've discovered that they're actors. Oftentimes they're actors. They're from a theater or from the Freedom Trail, or maybe they have a few odd jobs because they're actors, right? But not like here. Well, I guess probably here too. But we found that they're absolutely crucial, and they really teach the process of bill building and understanding all the different twos and fros. They break apart first in committees, then into caucuses, and they come back together. And they're basically they go off into 2 or 3 rooms. We can have up to 100 players, and when they come back into the chamber, they have to present pros and cons. So students come up to the podium, just like a senator does, and they speak to the assembled class, their classmates. And oftentimes it can be very raucous. So the opposition can boo and hiss, even though that's not allowed in the Senate. But it's entertaining. And the amount of cheers that we get, I can hear from my office from this experience is really quite amazing. These kids come in, typical, they've been on a school bus for an hour or 2 hours. They're stretching their legs, they get to the lobby, and they're kids, right? They just want to kind of play and whatnot. And they walk into the chamber and they just fall silent. They look around at this space. And it really is transformational, and they take on the role in this whole process of building a bill and becoming a senator. So we call them senators in training. And at the end of it, they take a vote. So on their tablets, they take a vote. You can see here we have the committee nominees, whether it was accepted or rejected. This seems like it was roundly rejected across the board here. What was the top?
Must have been bad.
Yeah. Reject the final bill. And so it doesn't matter, actually. We teach them that passing bills isn't necessarily what you're there for. It's to discuss and pass good bills. And so if it's a bad bill, don't pass it, and that's part of what your role is in the whole process. So where we started, I will hand this over to Greg now. Yep. Part of the early team.
So I was part of the design team along with a bunch of other folks from EMK and ESI Design and Control Group and Richard Lewis Media Group that all worked on sort of the Senate Immersion module. So how do we get from having a bunch of ghosted figures in this 3D mock-up to having all those kids there? So at the beginning, we kind of laid out at the very beginning of the process, as we were thinking about it, we really laid out what the mission for this was going to be, based on thinking about what Senator Kennedy what Chris was saying about the way Senator Kennedy wanted the Institute to serve as a place for experiencing and interacting with the Senate. So we wanted to create a highly interactive 2-hour Senate simulation. That was at the core of it. It wasn't something that you were going to watch, that you had to participate in. This didn't happen unless you did it. Was really important to us, and we had to write a curriculum to support teachers before and after the visit. So we created some stuff that teachers can do before they get there, stuff they can go out and take back to the classroom the next day or in lessons afterwards to facilitate more discussion in the classroom. And then we also were charged with developing a kit that allowed people from across the country to write new content for the simulation. So the idea wasn't just this was an experience within the walls of the museum, that this was also something that people could engage with by creating new content, by writing. So there's, that's sort of the ultimate one, is you actually write the stuff. You dig deep into how you would think about policy and then write your own little Senate simulation. So there were some constraints that were laid on us for the project. So there had to go in this building, and the building wasn't done at the time. So we had to sort of design this game and think about this experience outside of the walls of the museum, because there was scaffolding there still. What are the other constraints we had? We had to assume that participants entered knowing very little about the subject matter. So maybe they knew a little bit about the Senate, maybe they knew a little bit about the bill they were going to create, but we had to assume that they knew kind of next to nothing. And we had to get them up to speed to be able to talk about it in a really intelligent way and debate it, all within a very short window. So we had to give them that information. We had to support a variable number of participants, from 20 to 100. And so if any of you have done game design in the past, supporting a wide variation of player numbers like that is extremely difficult. There's a huge difference between 10 people playing basketball and 100 people playing basketball. And so, and we wanted it to not just be something that like you were operating in a silo, but that you were playing all together, that you guys were all doing this thing as a group. And the experience needed to be repeatable and sustainable. It runs 5 days a week, every day, and everyone has to walk out of this experience feeling like they contributed. Right? We didn't want winners and losers in this thing. We didn't want people going home and saying like, "God, there weren't supposed to be points in this." As Chris said, like sometimes maybe you pass legislation or you don't, but the idea is that you contributed to the discussion about it. And we had to be able to support legislation from across American history. So we cover everything. We wanted to cover everything from the Affordable Care Act to being able to talk about the Compromise of 1850. And those are radically different pieces of legislation with different numbers of senators involved. And
We're working on a superhero sim as well.
Right.
The characters are superheroes.
And so we wanted to create a system which was relatively flexible that we could use to support different types of content. And we had to have kids back on the bus after 2 hours. So this was basically constrained to the lengths of what field trips are going to be. We didn't have, if you look at like a lot of precedents for things like this, like Model UN or Boy State or something like that, where they really have a long period of time with them. We had about 2 hours from getting them off the bus, getting them in, having that intelligent discussion, then getting back on the bus. So we laid out some goals for what this was going to be. So we wanted to, as an experiential goal, we wanted to make the Senate, which is this really arcane institution. And if you talk to people who know much, who are invested in the Senate, they'll tell you all about like what way the special clocks they have there and the way that the voting happens.
Terms like cloture.
Yeah, are you going to represent cloture? And so we had to represent, simplify this really arcane thing and make it clear and engaging to folks. And so we decided to break that down into 4 big ideas. And so we thought of these as like, these are the learning goals that we wanted to lay out. These are the big enduring understandings we wanted kids to walk out of this experience with. We didn't really care if you walked out knowing what cloture is. Well, we wanted you to walk out with these things that you'd be able to remember 20, 30 years later. So the first one was that senators have to represent. They have to represent things. They represent themselves, their party, their state. They're not just there making decisions willy nilly. So the experience is crafted to do that. So the part Christopher was referring to about the morning business is all about talking to kids about that. The facilitator walks around and asks questions about, what state are you from? Can you tell us a little bit about, you're from Arkansas? Tell us a little bit about Arkansas. It's right on your tablet. You can look there and get them into that role. What party do you represent? You're a Democrat. What do the Democrats care about? And there's some information on your tablet if you need a refresher. So to get them to think about that. The second big understanding we wanted them to have was that before you can make a decision, you have to do your research, right? That senators, their minds aren't made up. That if you're a good senator, you go in and you do research, you talk to people. So we created sessions committee sessions where they were specifically there to, interview experts. This is the part where we had to get them up to speed, right? We had to get them to learn about this subject matter, which they may not know much about. Something about the Patriot Act or the Affordable Care Act. Most of us probably couldn't name more than one or two provisions from that. 3, if you want to be effective, you're going to have to learn to negotiate. Not necessarily, and we debated this a lot too, was did this mean compromise? What did it mean? Like, were we about compromise? Were we about getting your way? But at the end, we decided this is about negotiation. It's about you talking with other people and kind of coming to your own conclusions about things. So, and at the end of the day, you have to take a stand. So that's that part where they go back to the chamber. They give their pros and cons for things, and then they all have to get up and vote. And we thought a lot about the theater of how that works. We could have just had everyone vote on their tablets, but we're like, no, we want that to be an important moment. So we asked all the senators, we'd go through roll call, one by one, and ask each senator to stand up. Will the senator from Massachusetts stand up and cast their vote? And they just have to stand up and say yay or nay. And so they, learn that that's something you have to do in front of everybody. So as we were thinking about the design of this, there's a bunch of big opportunities we're really excited about, right? So we've got this really dramatic Senate chamber that sort of, in some ways, as you said, kind of did half our job for us, right? The kids walk into this chamber and they're like, oh, wow, I'm a senator. And then all our job's like sort of halfway done. Start calling them senator and they start believing it, which is great. That's what we want. We had we knew we would have technology that would allow us to coordinate a bunch of people. So if you ever had to wrangle 100 different players doing something, it's a pain in the butt. Having technology helps. We knew we'd have knowledgeable facilitators that would guide and enrich the experience. They would be able to talk with people and really make it come to life. And I can't stress, as you were saying, how important these guys are to the experience. They're the ones that make it come alive, I think. And we had teachers as our partners before and after, helping us craft the curriculum, helping us think about what would support them in the classroom, what would help buttress their curriculums that they had designed. So how'd it go? What are some of the milestones and learnings we took out of it? So the development, because we didn't have the building, we went and we did a lot of play testing. So this gives you a sense of like how we thought about the flow of the experience. So you come into orientation, there's a swearing in, then they go off to all these subcommittees. So what looks relatively simple is a weird web of different things. And then we took this experience on the play test. We play tested it in schools around New York and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Connecticut, Michigan, Kentucky. So we play tested, then play tested some more, and play tested a little bit more, and play tested more with all sorts of different groups, right? So we did it with 8th graders, we did it with high school students. These are a bunch of Senate staffers that came up to Massachusetts, up to Boston and played the thing. And man, those guys got into it. They did 2 of them. They did it the first day. They did the ACA. They didn't quite pass it, and then the second day they all came in like just raring to go. Like we did the Patriot Act or immigration the second day, and like I've never seen kids that combative.
This is probably sort of the amount of experiment. This is crucial, this play testing, as Greg said, and I guess it's unlike the burgers at Simpsons, you don't really get fat on this thing. Really,
right.
Really refine.
They can do it over and over. We did it with generals. So we really tested out the experience with lots of different people. And every time we would do it, we would learn something. And every time you'd think like, oh, I think we know how this works. We'd do it again, and we're like, oh, we'd always learn something new. It was always valuable. We collaborated closely with teachers. And we also worked with policy experts. We went down to Washington and talked with a bunch of folks to try and make sure that the experience was nonpartisan. So we worked with people from both sides of the aisle on every SIM or every Senate module we wrote, from the Affordable Care Act to the immigration one. We worked with people from Kennedy staff to the McConnell Center. Really make sure that this was was capturing a range of different viewpoints. We worked with a bunch of different partners writing those sims, making new content. Some of those worked out, some of them didn't, but we were really, really careful to make sure that we had lots of different ways we were thinking about it, so that we weren't relying on any sort of one mode. And then eventually through that, like, we found ways that worked well. So the outcomes from this, in the end, I think we managed to create a unique and meaningful roles for up to 100 players, which was really exciting, right? So every senator has a unique profile. Basically, you come in and you play yourself, but you play someone from a state. You play yourself from a state that maybe you don't know much about. So, but each one is important. And then we thought about how that got assigned to committees was important. It wasn't just sort of randomly done. And that was to really ensure that people had stuff to discuss with one another. We got people they would come in cold and they would leave cheering, which was also always exciting. We got one time some kids sang the national anthem at the end of it, which was mind blowing. You're like, okay, are you making fun of us? And I don't think they were. I think they were genuinely inspired.
No, they often go away. We hear stories from the teachers that on the bus home, they're continuing to discuss the topics and, needle their fellow classmates about why they voted this way or that way.
Yeah. And one of the best things is that people leave with an appreciation for different viewpoints, right? And so we're part of the, again, back to the curricular part, we really are careful about, like, crafting the way that we kind of try and transfer the experience to a sort of, transfer the learning out of the experience. And so there's some questions that Matt or the facilitator will ask at the end, just really simple stuff that sort of begins to spark, like, make sure that they understand and have, like, a string to follow into the learning, like, who here played a senator from a state they weren't from? And to Massachusetts, almost 98% of them raised their hands. So the sim is booked up.
Yeah, it's booked out. We the first year we were only 4 days a week, and this past year we're now 5 days a week to meet the demand. The teachers love it, the students love it, and they're coming from not just Massachusetts, but they're coming from Rhode Island, Connecticut, Maine. We have had a few come from Texas and from California. So it's the word is getting out, and I think for social studies teachers, and they're looking for something as rich and engaging as this, and this is pretty unique.
Right. So real quickly, a couple of lessons learned. Again, I'll say it again, and say it over and over. There's no such thing as enough playtesting. You always benefit from that. And what we would get out of those oftentimes were little tweaks to language. So we would learn to always be the more we would say, the sooner we would say start referring to them as senators, the more they would take on those roles. The sooner we got them to get into party groupings and talk to them about okay, Republicans, what are we going to do? We have to go. We're going to have to negotiate with the Democrats in a minute. Let's figure out what we want to do. And so little tweaks to language made all the difference in the experience.
Yeah, and actually, and one of the other things that we found was that people really appreciated that actually passing bills or even discussing these matters is hard. It's harder than you think. So it's easy to kind of criticize Congress for, do nothing Congress. And I always tell people when they say, oh, Congress, they're just yelling at each other, they don't do anything. I say, well, that's actually built into the process, is talking to each other. Now, it's a little less civil than it should be right now. But, the alternative is something that we see in North Korea or Mussolini or Hitler, where there's silence and you go along. So that's really built into it.
It's the cooling dish of democracy.
Yeah, the cooling dish. We heard a little bit of that when they did the nuclear option, how it was no longer the cooling dish. We'll see. But also you need to do homework, and change is possible. So you can change people's minds, and you can bring them to a civil debate in this venue.
Another thing is about the technology. Everyone already has a supercomputer in their pocket, so we're like, "Oh, we'll have these tablets," and people will be amazed by them. They're like, Nexuses. I've got
only 7 inches. Right,
Yeah. So it's an important lesson. It's like what's amazing today, 6 months from now may not be amazing. And one of the things we found oftentimes is technology is time consuming, right? People fiddle with technology, but what we really want is people are engaging, right? I always took it as a moment of pride, the thing was working when the kid put the thing down, right? When they would put that aside and just look at the people around them and talk to them.
And the CIO was happy they didn't drop it.
Right. They placed it down. People can handle hard topics. We were in the Compromise of 1850, which the first time we did it, we were so nervous about it, because it's a difficult subject with a range of kids from inner city Boston, and people could handle it, and in fact they wanted to. They they did a great job.
I love how you in the early testing you had him. He was dressed up, right? As some
Oh yeah,
character.
Dan, he insisted on wearing his cravat. And you also just have to okay with people to be okay letting people be people. So if you're going to do this sort of work where it's like really interactive, you're really giving like authorship and control to the people, like really authorship of their experience. They're gonna behave like in ways that are unexpected, and that's exciting. But you have to like be able to willing to like let that happen.
One thing that we've learned over the last 2 years that we've been open is that some technology components were locked in pretty early. So Greg and his team did a lot of play testing on paper. So for them, it was easy to kind of shift things around and make changes to it and add elements and remove elements. But when it was handed over to the coding team, there were some early decisions that locked us into a platform that is a little bit, I guess, brittle is one way to put it. There was, I forget someone, I think it was the Welcome to Vincent van Gogh, where they talked about how they didn't go with Wi-Fi positioning and whatnot because it was a little, wasn't precise enough and too problematic. Well, everything on those tablets is connected to a server through Wi-Fi. So we have a lot of Cisco WAPs and whatnot. But if there's a switch in the screen at any point and that tablet decides to flake out for whatever reason, they can be kicked out of the game. And then we have now developed a whole process of restoring a tablet and whatnot. But it adds friction to the process. So that's one lesson we learned.
Christopher, maybe we can have a few minutes for Q&A. We're down to
Yeah.
I have a question. How long did it take for the first smart kid to say, research, I don't need to do any research. The president doesn't.
We haven't heard that, I guess. I would say the facilitators do an amazing job of and the teachers, really, of bringing the kids to, when they finally arrive at the Senate chamber, they're really ready to play the game. They're really ready to engage in the process. I think what happens, in that case, what would happen really is that when the time came for them to vote or give a pro or con position up at the microphone, people would either laugh them down or their voice would be ignored in the vote. And so they would soon find out that, persuasion, you have to have some intelligence behind your argument in this, at least in this environment. I don't know about in the real world, but
Hi, I'm Rob from Disney Imagineering. It looks like your entire experience is centered around school field trips. Is there an element to it that allows for either individual visitors to join groups or homeschooled kids, that kind of thing?
Well, so yeah, the sim definitely, because the minimum is, 20 is probably really low, but more like 30, 35 is the minimum. Probably because they go off to the committees and then, if you only have 6 people, it's like, it's hard to keep the energy going. But we do have in the Institute what we call today's vote. So you can think of that as sim light. So we use the chamber for a lot of different purposes. One of them is a today's vote. So the visitor off the street would get a tablet as well. They go through an orientation process. They customize it with their own initials, their own selfie. And then they go through the surround space that I showed in one of the early slides. And that's more about like the history of the Senate. There's a replica of the senator's office in there. That's about, you can play what my girls call the sprinkle game, which is you get to pass a bill, how a bill becomes a law. So you get to pass the National Sunday Bill, and you play with other people. It's two or more players can decide what the toppings are on this Sunday. And as part of that experience, you go into the chamber and we have a today's vote. So those are current topics. So we're talking about the nuclear energy, NEIC, I forget the name of it. But that changes monthly. So those are current topics being debated in the Senate right now, and we recite pros and cons speeches of senators as happened on the floor. And then anyone here can come in and vote on their tablet, and they can actually stand up and talk. That was actually one of the other things we were very nervous about when we opened our doors. It was like, the today's vote experience is we have our actors who kind of facilitate, but then at the end of it, we actually give the microphone out to anyone in the chamber because they are senators in training, and we ask them if they want to voice their opinion about immigration or nuclear energy or drones or whatnot. And it's amazing how much people do stand up and persuade their fellow attendees to change. It's kind of like 12 Angry Men, little mini scenes here and there. So
I think we have time for one more question. There we go.
Catherine with Cortina Productions. What kinds of things did you do to make sure that the kids tried to stay in character with the senator they're representing? I mean, you talked about the one of the most important goals was that they had to represent the state that they're from. And I'm curious how you were able to keep them doing that through a 2-hour session.
So a lot of that was like language. So again, you get to play. We didn't want to make people play a character necessarily. So you have very little bio. It's like maybe it's like, oh, you were in the military. And then there's some facts, some really simple, like loose couple facts about the state, some interests. They have some ups and down arrows. So it's pretty broad. And then one of the things we do is every chance we get, we ask them what state they're from. Every time they get up to speak, we go, Senator, just remind us again what state you're from. And so they'll get up, well, I'm the Republican from Delaware. And that just keeps them in character. And so we would do that constantly. And after a while, they internalized it, which was amazing.
And also, I answered the question that was asked earlier about if the kids act up and don't learn their characters. Did you get that in the playtest, where kids would mouth off?
No, people want to do it. I think that was what was really amazing to us about it.
That's great. We had a video of President Obama who came to our dedication, but I will not play it because it's 2 minutes long, and I'm going to get the hook in a minute. But I wanted to end here. I can play it for you later.
I think we're going to bend the rule. Let's be reminded of the great orator. Please play it.
I didn't hear that. Maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
You want to go back?
Oh, I can. Oh, sure. All right.
All right. Yeah.
It's hard for our children to see in the noisy and too often trivial pursuits of today's politics the possibilities of our democracy, our capacity together to do big things. And this place can help change that. It can help light the fire of imagination, plant the seed of noble ambition in the minds of future generations. Imagine a gaggle of school kids clutching tablets, turning classrooms into cloakrooms and hallways into hearing rooms. Assign an issue of the day and the responsibility to solve it. Imagine their moral universe expanding as they hear about the momentous battles waged in that chamber and how they echo throughout today's society. Great questions of war and peace, the tangled bargains between North and South, federal and state, the original sins of slavery and prejudice, and the unfinished battles for civil rights and opportunity and equality. Imagine the shift in their sense of what's possible the first time they see a video of senators who look like they do. Men and women, blacks and whites, Latinos, Asian Americans, those born to great wealth, but also those born of incredibly modest means. Imagine what a child feels the first time she steps onto that floor, before she's old enough to be senator, before she's told what she can't do, before she's told who she can't talk to or work with, what she feels when she sits at one of those desks, what happens when it comes her turn to stand and speak on behalf of something she cares about and cast a vote and have a sense of purpose. It's maybe just not for kids. What if we all carried ourselves that way? What if our politics, our democracy, were as elevated, as purposeful as she imagines it to be, right here?
Big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.